Welcome to the Connected Enterprise Podcast. This is Carl Lewis, your host from Vision 33, and my guest today is Chuck Wachendorfer. Chuck is the president of distribution from think2perform. Welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, and think2perform.
I'm a speaker, author, executive coach. I work with executives, athletes, business owners to improve decision-making under pressure. Think2perform is the firm that I lead. We're about 21 years old. We work with everybody from the FBI to doctors and nurses in surgery, pro and college athletes, financial advisors, business owners, executives, really to help improve decision-making. And what you can know about decision-making is decision-making has twice the impact on our performance than talent and skill combined. I'm not saying talent and skill don't matter. They just don't matter as much as decision-making. And unlike our IQ, which we can't improve, I can't get any smarter. We can, with practice and focus and effort, become better decision makers. And we make about 35,000 decisions a day. So most of them we don't think about. So how I take my coffee in the morning, getting dressed, brushing our teeth, those are all choices we make that we don't necessarily think about. But there's about 60% of our decisions that are conscious. And we don't have to make all 35,000 decisions better a day, but if we made one or two better choices a day, you're talking about 500, 600, 700 better decisions a year. And if you've ever been to any kind of reunion, family reunion, school reunion, I went to my 40th high school reunion a couple of years ago. You've had an experience maybe like I did, where you walk in the ballroom or wherever they're having the get together, and you see somebody, somebody spots you from across the room. And they go, "Hey, Carl, how are you, man?" And you have no idea who that person is. And all of a sudden you go, "Oh, that's Chuck," right? And then the very next thought that comes into your mind, hopefully it's your inside voice, is what the hell happened to that guy? Like, we were all enjoying the same thing at the same point in our lives, but 35,000 decisions a day over 10, 20, in my case, 40 years of your life takes people in very different directions. And so that's what we work on. We help leaders become more effective at decision-making and aligning decisions in their organizations.
When we talked last time, I told you that illustration of the reunion really hits home with me because I had my 50th high school reunion last year. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You didn't like just wake up one day and be this mature person able to help guide other people. How'd you get there?
I'm the oldest in my family. As many of us who are the oldest in our family, I was expected to lead by example. That was a lot of responsibility. We've all had it. And I think that I started playing more leadership roles in school and scouts. But I also found myself at one point in my career, very early on, I switched careers. I have a mechanical engineering degree, mechanical engineering background. And I left engineering to become a financial advisor for American Express. And it was a 100% commission job. At one point, I found myself with no money, no food, and no credit. I literally remember this like it was yesterday. And I thought, well, maybe I'll quit my job. And I thought, well, that means that I have no money, no food, no credit, no job. And there's people in my office at the time making the kind of money that I wanted to make. So it wasn't the job that was the problem. And this was the big epiphany for me. It was like, maybe it has something to do with me and the choices I was making. And that began this journey of like examining my own decision making and how I was spending my time. And you'll see these jerseys behind me. Even as a kid, one of the things that fascinated me was about sports. Sports is probably the most visible arena where you see the impact of decision making on a game. And it's not always the most talented athlete that operates well and makes great choices. It's the person who can manage themselves well. But at a very early age, that began this curiosity. I characterize it as like, why is someone successful? Why is someone else not? And it usually has a lot to do with their decision making. And so I began to apply some of what I was observing to other people in my own life, examining more thoroughly, more consciously. We talk about self-awareness in the book. How do I become more self-aware? Because I was making a lot of choices that weren't great, but I wasn't noticing them. Leadership begins with leading oneself. And that's what we talk about in the book is I got to do a better job of leading myself before I worry about leading somebody else.
I knew we had a lot in common. You just mentioned you were the oldest, right? Well, I was also, of course, and had three younger brothers. I still remember to this day, I was about 15, 16 years old, and I informed my mother that I was the oldest, and it was my responsibility to blaze the trail. And she said, blazing the trail is fine, but nobody asked you to build a 6-lane freeway, right?
That's great.
You mentioned the book. The name of the book is Don't Wait for Someone Else to Fix It. And that's what really intrigued me about the work that you guys do. Tell us a little bit about the book, which you just were, and where folks can get it.
You can get the book anywhere. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Porchlight Books has it. Any kind of online retailer, you're going to be able to pick it up. You can pick it up at our online store at think2perform.com. It's think, the number 2, perform.com. But the book itself is a toolkit. We wanted it to be a book that people use, that we call it a workbook. So we talk about these 8 essentials, but we also give people exercises at the end of each chapter to begin using and applying in their own life. It is a call to action. We want to help people do is make a positive difference in their own lives, as well as the lives of the people around them. It could be their family, could be their community, could be their company, could be their nonprofit. It doesn't matter. Doug and I, when we wrote this book, wanted this book to be able to impact anybody, anywhere. And with the number of issues that we're all facing individually, as a society, as a planet, we need more positive impact. We need more of us to step up and make that positive impact. And whether it's impacting your own life or the life of your family or on a larger scale, it doesn't matter. But that's where the kind of the genesis of the book came from.
If you're a CEO of your own business, any business really, but especially if it's your thought, your best idea, that something you created, there is no end to the work that can be done. And an awful lot of these guys and women, they work long, hard hours. There's more
Yes.
work to be done than they can do themselves. How can a leader of these kind of businesses create an environment that's not 100% completely dependent upon them and their ideas every day?
It's a great question, Carl. And we talk about this, I think it might be chapter 8 or 9 around empowering others. So we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders of businesses. And if you're any good as a software, you've built a software business, a plumber, a lawyer, a financial advisor, a doctor, if you're any good, you go from being this individual one-person enterprise to having a team of people around you. Leading a team of people, no matter what your type of business is different than being a solo entrepreneur. And that's what we help people do, is make that transition. How do I go from getting paid for doing things to getting paid for getting things done? Getting things done is working through other people. And in order to work through other people, I have to be able to push down decision-making into my organization, into my team. If I'm the business owner, what I want to know is that people are going to make decisions consistent with how I think about where I want to take the business. Well, they have to know some things. They got to know, where am I going with the business? That's the vision. What do we stand for? Those are our values. So if they know that, then they can begin to say, okay, if this is where we're going, this is what we stand for. Of the choices I have, which of these choices best align with the direction and what we stand for? And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs and founders of businesses maybe miss that step. They're used to having it in their head. Like, I know where the business is going because I started it. I know what I want it to stand for because they're my values. But it stays sometimes in their head. And what we have to help them do is crystallize that. Even large companies, Carl, they'll have corporate values and a corporate vision statement. And when we're working with an executive team, one of the questions we'll ask of the executive team, what's the company's vision? What are the corporate values? And not many people know. I mean, even though it's in a plaque in the lobby or on their newsletter or on their website somewhere, nobody really knows what it is. And the point of knowing the vision and values is so we can use them and use them in making choices, making decisions. What any kind of founder or senior executive wants is, we want alignment. Alignment gets us traction. But if the person on the front line doesn't know where we're going or doesn't know our values, their execution is going to be less than optimal. What we have found in our work is most people want to be better at their job than their company needs them to be. The problem is nobody ever asks. So level 2, what we talk about in the book, is connecting your individual vision and values for your life to where we're going as a company. How good do you want to be here, Carl, at this company? Where do you want to take your career? What are your values? How do your values connect to the company's values? That's where engagement really occurs. Is I take the time as a leader, whether it's my business, or I'm an executive in a large company, I take the time to ask each person, where you want to take your career, Carl? How can I help you get there? And most people don't say, I want to be average, or I'm just biding my
Yeah.
time. They're not going to say that. They're going to say, I really want to be good at my job, or I want your job. Okay, well, let's talk about what you have to do to be good at your job or to get my job. Now I've got your attention. I'm getting you engaged. And that's what most leaders want, is engagement. And back to the title of the book, leaders need more people seeing and fixing the issues. They don't need their team saying, well, Chuck's got it or Carl's got it. He must see that problem. You got enough on your plate. They need everybody in their team. We talk about levels of leadership. Level 1 leadership is I take direction. Level 2 leadership is I take direction and I identify problems. Level 3 is I take direction, I identify problems, and I come up with solutions. And everybody on your team should be a level 3 leader, taking direction, identifying problems, and coming up with solutions. Level 4 is mobilizing people around that solution. And level 5 is crystallizing vision and values. If you're a founder or an entrepreneur, your company, or you're a CEO of a large company, you're the level 5 leader. You set vision and values. And the people that work for you have to be level 4, mobilizing people around a solution. But everybody in the company has to be a level 3 leader, which is identifying problems and coming up with solutions. It may not be the solution you act on, but you want them coming up with an idea how to solve it, because the people closest to the work, we've all heard this, the people closest to the work usually have the best idea how to solve it, not the person 3 or 4 levels removed from what's actually going on.
As a leader, let's put it this way, if you don't invest in others, they don't start making decisions, it's hard to make traction. Right? It's really
Absolutely.
hard to make traction. I've interviewed hundreds of people through the years. One of the other things that I find CEOs, maybe they've had this business for 10, 15 years, maybe it's a second generation type of a thing. They get into this role and they feel lost, like I'm not who I wanted to be anymore. How do they get what they want and retain the ability to remain true to themselves? Like get a vacation, go home at 5 o'clock at night on occasion.
This gets at what you and I were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, which is the whole lead by example thing. What I want is people to want my job, whether I'm a business owner or a senior executive. The only way my company grows is if people want to take on more responsibility. If they don't, that's a problem. And if they don't want my job because I work all the time, I have a miserable family life, I have no balance, I'm an alcoholic, whatever, I work all the time, nobody's going to want my job and I'm going to burn out. So I have a responsibility, if I want to grow the company, to have balance in my life, because everybody's going to look at me and go, either they want my life or they don't want my life. And I want them to want, again, back to lead by example. I want them to go, this guy, he's not only successful in business, but he's got a great life outside of business. And that's very hard to do. I heard an interview years ago with a woman, her name's Christine Lagarde. Christine Lagarde used to run the International Monetary Fund, which lends billions of dollars to third world countries. And she's a very, very successful as an attorney, a mother. I think she had 3 kids, wife, her husband was an ambassador for France. And they were interviewing, like, God, she's got this impressive resume. And the interviewer said to Christine, she said, Christine, God, you have all these accomplishments. Is it possible for somebody to have it all? And I'll never forget her answer. She said, yes, just not all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like our lives are a marathon. They're not a sprint. And it's great for me to want to build my business. But at some point, I've got to have interests outside of my business for me to be fulfilled. And I can say this personally. I had great success early in my career, business success, financial success, but it was at a price for me personally. And I had to gear that back. I actually left American Express after about 17 years and took 2 years off because my life was out of balance. You don't always have to take 2 years off, but if we can learn to pace ourselves, and that's easier said than done. Simple and easier, not synonymous. What we're talking about is a simple concept, but it's hard to employ. And that's where our business at Think to Perform, we help executives, business owners develop their people and achieve that balance in their lives.
I hear that. I felt similar at one point. It was a move. I made a move at the time, to Southern California. At the same time, something clicked and I was able to stop some of the bad habits. Working late at night. It's like I would go home at 5 o'clock and I would just, okay, I'm just going to spend time with my wife. That was it. Things started turning around for me at that point. The timing, I think, was just right. Things clicked.
There's a guy we interviewed for our book. His name's Randy. And Randy's a very, very successful guy, still in business for himself. And Randy was a client of mine. Randy was telling me one day how he thought he had about 5 years left. Now, Randy was probably in his late 40s. So he was not an old guy. He was in his late 40s. He's like, I can't keep doing this. I don't have it in me. I think I got 5 years left. And I said, well, talk to me about what's going on, Randy. And he said, well, I feel like I got 15 balls in the air at any one time. And I said, well, why don't we talk about handing off some of those balls to some of the people that work for you? And he goes, well, yeah, but that's my job. My job is to do these 15 things. I said, well, do you think some of the people that work for you want your job? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, maybe you're denying them an opportunity to see what your job's like. What if you handed off some of these balls to them and created some growth opportunities for them to learn new things and be challenged themselves? And he's like, wow, that's a great idea. I'd never thought about it that way. But that's sometimes we tend to do what we've always done.
Yep.
If I always worked 100 hours, I'm going to work 100 hours. But you can't do that indefinitely and expect to have any satisfaction outside of that. And at some point, you won't be able to do that. So
Right.
we have to develop other people and give them opportunities to grow, just like we had. And it also helps us live a life outside of work.
Always a good thing. You wrote this book with your friend Doug Lennox, and he wrote a book. And I know that this is part of what the organization believes, in which he said business success should be built on the bedrock of moral values.
Yes.
Can you put that into some context for us? Because for me, growing up when I did, I see that as being a bit lacking in today's business world, that whole
Yeah,
bedrock moral value.
the firms that get all the attention are the ones that violate those moral values. And Doug's book, Doug Lennox is my co-author, and he wrote a book that you're referring to called Moral Intelligence. It was published in 2005. The book looked at how well businesses did that adhered to a moral code. It took them 9 years to write the book. And what they looked at was that businesses who were adhered to a set of moral values performed better over time than those that did not. The list is long. I mean, we got Bernie Madoff, we got Enron, we got WorldCom. I mean, there's plenty of examples today where people violate those. They'll sacrifice an adherence to a moral code to drive profitability and growth, but it's not sustainable. And so in Doug's book, they identified 4 common moral principles: integrity, responsibility, compassion, and forgiveness. And regardless of where you are, where you live, the color of your skin, male or female, whether you believe in God or not, it's not focused on a religion, humankind around the globe believe in those 4 moral principles. Integrity is doing what I say, standing up for what's right, telling the truth. Responsibility is taking responsibility for my choices and admitting mistakes and failures. Compassion is about actively caring about other people. And forgiveness is about letting go of my mistakes or the mistakes of other people. All 4 of those contribute to business success. So integrity, when I operate with integrity, I build trust. When I operate with responsibility, I develop inspiration. I inspire other people. When I operate with compassion, I retain relationships. Retention is important. And when I operate with forgiveness, I inspire creativity. Most companies want us to grow, but to grow, sometimes we've got to try new things. When we try new things, we make more mistakes. But if we can't forgive ourselves or forgive other people, then we stifle creativity. And forgiveness, by the way, is not about the absence of consequences. There are going to be consequences. So if I make a mistake, there's a consequence. If I hit somebody else while I'm driving my car, even though I didn't mean to do it, there's a consequence to that. But it is about letting go and moving on. Lily Tomlin has a great quote. She said, forgiveness is about letting go of all hope for a better past. And so those 4 universal moral principles are important to adhere to, not be perfect, but have a directional commitment to those 4 principles in our lives and in our businesses.
I'll be honest with you. What really drew me to the title of this book that you guys wrote is the fact that this is a phrase, this exact phrase is something that my father said to me growing up. Don't wait for someone else to fix it.
Yeah.
And he meant it in a myriad of ways, whether it was something that was broken in your house, your car that needed repair. he was a real believer in take responsibility for it, go fix it yourself. If you see something that bugs you, take care of it, fix it. Don't wait for the other guy to do it. What are the 8 things that you guys put into your book? Don't wait for someone else to fix it.
Identify your ideal self. Who do I hope to be on my best day? That's knowing my values. When you ask people if they have values, they act kind of insulted. Like, what do you mean? I don't have, you think I don't have values? That leads to the second question, which is, well, what are they? And that's where it gets kind of fuzzy. People say things like honesty or integrity or family. So what we talk about in the book is know your values. If I know my values, I can use them in guiding my decision making. The second essential is know your real self. So part of the human condition is we're going to make mistakes. None of us is perfect. But if I want to change my behavior or become a better decision maker, the key is self-awareness. Back to my point when I was laying on my bed, no money, no food, no credit. I mean, I was like, realized like, this is not anybody else's fault but my own. So I had to pay more attention to myself. Well, how do I do that? How do I improve my self-awareness? We talk about that in the book. We give you an exercise called the freeze to improve our self-awareness. And what we notice is there are patterns over our lives that we've established, and some of those patterns help us, and some of those patterns hold us back. So what are the patterns that are helping me? And what are the patterns that are holding me back? Maybe exercise, I don't do enough, or I eat the wrong things, or I get emotional and I make poor choices. It could be a variety of things. But that would be third. And the goal is to begin to align ourselves with who we hope to be on our best day. That's, knowing my ideal self and then identifying and paying attention to my real self. The third is act with integrity and responsibility. Integrity and responsibility are interrelated. If I tell the truth, if I act with honesty, it requires responsibility. I have to tell the truth, act with responsibility. When I do those two things, I inspire other people and build trust. And as Stephen Covey likes to say, where high trust exists, things move faster and are cheaper. So integrity and responsibility are important. Essential number 4 is empathy and compassion. Empathy is recognizing how other people are feeling. So as a leader, what I want people to do is to act on some of the things that we've decided on. Well, I have to help them change their behavior to do new things. Sometimes people get stuck emotionally. They get stressed, or they're uncomfortable, or they're anxious, and that can become paralyzing. If I don't recognize that as a leader, then I can't help them get unstuck. If I recognize you're having a hard time, I ask you about it. Carl, tell me what's going on for you. My wife just fell ill, or she's in the hospital, or I got in a car accident, or I'm not sure what you're talking about here. I don't understand how this relates to my job. Then that enables me as a leader to act with compassion. I can help you get unstuck. That's why that's important. Next is deciding wisely. Back to decision making. We give you a model that you can begin to use. We call the 4 R's of recognize, reflect, reframe, respond, to begin making better choices, both individually and as an organization. The next one is learning agility, letting go of what you know. We've heard that change is constant. In order to take advantage of change or anticipate change, I got to be able to let go of what I know. So we talk about learning agility. And then achieving purposeful goals. The key there in chapter 9 is achieving purposeful goals, not just setting purposeful goals. There's a methodology we talk about in goal achievement that involves knowing my key activities. Key activities are things I must do to achieve my goal. And for most of us, we set a goal, and we've heard the acronym SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, results-based, time-bound. That's fine. But what really matters in goal achievement, not just goal setting, is knowing what I must do. So in any health goal, lowering cholesterol, losing weight, running a marathon, there's only 2 key activities, diet and exercise. And where most of us fall down is we don't know the key activities. I mean, in life in general, not just health, but health is my example. And we don't know how much of either we must do. So how much diet and how much exercise are we talking about? And then we have to ask ourselves the acid test question, which is, am I willing to do that? Because if the answer is no, then what I have is a dream, not a goal. If the answer is yes, well, then I can begin to make progress on that. And we talk about that in chapter 9. The final one is empowering other people, which is about how we think about developing other people to make decisions consistent with where we want to take our organization, our family, our business, and accessing best efforts through engagement.
Sounds like a very interesting full read for folks to do. If a business leader, CEO, president, any C leader really in the C-suite wants to change the way they operate and they want to reframe themselves and others, how do they start?
Start with yourself. We start the journey in the book is know your ideal self, pay attention to your real self. And what you'll notice is when you're consistent or not consistent with who you hope to be. And it's back to what we started our conversation with Carl, is in order for me to be more effective at influencing other people, we talk about this leadership logic chain. In order for me to be more effective with other people or influence their behavior, it begins with me managing my own behavior. Managing my own behavior includes me making different choices or better choices. Making better choices is grounded in self-awareness. So essential number one, aim to be your ideal self. And essential number two, know your real self, enables me to do a better job of leading by example. And I will become more influential with other people. The other six will flow from there.
That's a good way to begin for sure. Well, Chuck, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation. We'll look forward to seeing some other people pay attention to Think to Perform, because I think you guys have something to offer.
I appreciate that, Carl. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me on your show here today. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely, my friend. And for all of you out there, until we meet again, stay connected.